What's up, Tanisha? How are you?
Hey guys, I'm great. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. Like it's been so long. I don't know, 6 years. Like the last time we would have spoken would be the last day of graduation,
Yes.
2014.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. At least for you, Atit. At least with you and me, it's been 6 years. With the other two, I've still met them a little bit, but great to see everybody after so long.
Yeah, little bit for sure. And cool. So let's start. You did a course which is very rare. Like, not everyone after IT engineering does that, and you went to Georgia Tech. So, do you want to talk to us about your course? Why did you pick it up? And what was the course about?
Yeah, so basically, my course was a Master's of Science in Human Computer Interaction at Georgia Tech. And it was, I think, more rare when I had picked it back after DJ Sangvi. But at that point in the fourth year of engineering, it seemed like the natural way for me to go, specific to me, because I always had more of an inclination towards the arts and creative side of things growing up. So even when I picked engineering as my step after the 12th standard, my mom was actually in shock. She's like, wait, but how come engineering? She's like, I thought like if you get into Xavier's, you're going to go there. It just seemed natural. But at that point, I had decided to go with engineering for a variety of reasons. And even through engineering, I saw a common thread now that I think back, where I would always volunteer to be the one doing the front end of things, doing wireframing, doing sketching, presenting. And my teammates were very happy back then. They were like, you do it because we want to focus more on the back end and kind of build a solid portfolio for the more software engineering side of things. So they were happy that I was volunteering to take on more of the front end. And so I saw that pattern even through the internships I chose in DJ Sangvi, even my final year project with IIT, which I'm so glad I got to do. Through all of that, I had ended up actually doing the work of a UX designer without knowing that that is a field that exists. And my cousin brother had actually done MSHCI at Michigan just 2 years before I did. So I had started becoming aware of the field, and when I heard the kind of work that he does, I was like, this is awesome because it's an amalgamation of the technical side of things with psychology, with arts. And that was just perfect for me because I was getting to do a little of everything. So, yeah, that was how I applied for the course. And I had at that point made up my mind that if I don't get into, there were only like 6 or 7 schools offering a really good program for it, and some of them you needed a lot of experience, some you didn't. But I was like, if I don't get into the schools of my choice, then I think I'll wait it out another year and work in India. But I at that point I knew that I'm not cut out for software engineering. So I was like, okay, if I don't get into MSHCI, I'm just going to maybe wait it out. But I did get into Georgia Tech, and it was awesome. If you want me to dive deeper into that, let me know.
Yeah. Let's talk more about HCI and what does
Yeah.
the course, what are the subjects in the course?
Yeah.
Also, like if we could reverse a little back and talk about your IIT internship. I remember that kind of shaped up your decision to take this course up, and there was some kind of projects that you did there, which made you want to do UI UX.
Yeah, so with IIT, I think by that time I had already started being interested in HCI. So it did play a part in reaffirming that I wanted to do it. But where it kind of shaped it is when I started learning about the field through what I've been hearing through my brother as well as doing research. And what was cool about that project is it was a 1 year long education technology project with IIT, where I got to work with two close friends of mine, which was great. And we all found our own roles in the project that really suited us, which again was awesome because, it can be tough when everybody wants to kind of follow the same master's program. You all want the same thing on your portfolio or your resume. But here, somehow, we were all able to find what we wanted to do on the project. And essentially, we built from scratch, starting with research until development, an education technology app for renewable sources of energy, where my role was doing a lot of the initial research, sketches, wireframes, and also the 3D modeling portion of it, which was great because I learned a new skill. And so that was great because I went through that entire UX design process without formally knowing what that was called or what that is. And when I went to grad school, I thought about this and I was like, wait, I actually already did 1 year of UX work. So that definitely reaffirmed the fact that I'm interested in this field. Before that, before IIT even came along, I had interned at an animation studio during DJ Sangvi. And that was very interesting because, again, technical side, creative side, and all of that started falling together in the 4th year. It was also the year that a few of us in the IT department, especially, I think all of us got really serious about, I don't know, I started studying from reference books, not easy solutions. And I was like, you know what, I really want to understand what's going on. And it did kind of make us more serious in general. And yeah, it was great because that year turned out to be the most hardworking as well as the most fun year. But yeah, to reverse back a little, that was my experience with IIT, and it's relevant even today to what I do at my work, which is why I'm really grateful I got to do that. Yeah.
How did you get an internship at Animated Studio, or like, how did you even think about, applying for that position? Yeah.
It's because before I decided I want to go the engineering route, I wanted to be an animator. And my dream was to be an animator at that time, Walt Disney or Pixar. And I started studying a lot of it, and I had been doing a lot of research. But I think what deterred me back in the day, which I mean, maybe shouldn't today, was the life of animators is not very glamorous. It's like it becomes your hobby, becomes your job, to the extent that a lot of them were expressing frustration from what I was reading and doing research. But today I feel like you can't make those decisions unless you actually go through it. But at that point, it didn't seem as inviting. After I read that, I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to hate sketching in my life. Like, so I decided not to go with that. But that bug was always in me. So I was like, how can I find creative ways to apply the technical skills I'm learning? And I met this one person, I think maybe via my parents or my family friend or something, who ran an animation studio. And I asked him if I could do anything for him. So it was like an unpaid internship in Charkop, where I used to take a bus like 2 hours one way. But it was great because I used to get there and I could sketch and draw and do stuff. So yeah, that's how I did that. Sure. Yeah. So all of this experience and like all of this combined led me to Georgia Tech, where it was great that I got in there, I feel now, because Georgia Tech has a very solid HCI program for both beginners as well as more experienced people. And why I liked it is because the first semester, you're all learning the same foundational skills that you need as a UX designer or researcher. And that's what happened, where we learned research methods, we learned foundational courses, we learned what is HCI, like what are you doing with it, what are the applications. And that's important because all of you are grounded in the same way. But then after that, you're allowed to kind of go in and dabble in different fields. So if I want to do more interface side software things, there are courses for that. If you want to get into virtual reality, there are courses for that. I did some industrial design courses where I worked with Arduino and I made like an alarm clock, like a physical, tangible alarm clock. And there was also an amazing course I took called Technology and Poverty, which was right within my wheelhouse of things. And so my point is, we got to really dabble in a wide range of things. And the other nice part about being in that program was, like you said, it was pretty rare when we graduated to choose that, right? Because it's newer, it's not as technical. But my course was only 40 or 50 people, extremely diverse from all perspectives, because there was a 56-year-old student in my class. Like, he was there to change careers. There were people from different ethnicities. There were people from different backgrounds, like fine arts and industrial design and psychology. And everybody brought something new to the table. And so overall, it was a very positive experience because I just got to work with different kinds of people, different perspectives, and got to work on a lot of cool projects. Again, when I think about it, the common thread in all my projects was education, whether it was educating people about domestic abuse. Like one project was that, where I was showing data related to that and like giving creative ways to look at that. The other, my master's project was actually an edutech project related to quantum physics. But now that I think back, I'm like, shit, I really liked edutech the whole time. Um, but yeah, that was my master's in a nutshell. Is got to dabble in a lot of different things. I also did an internship with AT&T where I got to experience what it's like to be a UX designer in a big firm where things move slowly. And I also worked as a teaching assistant with some cool professors who I really learned a lot from. So overall, 2 years, but got to try a lot of different things, which now have led me to where I currently am working.
Speaking of, where are you currently working?
So I'm currently working at an edutech nonprofit called Zern. And Zern's mission is actually to make every kid love learning math. I'm not even kidding, like this is their mission. And it's really cute. It's really lofty, the mission, but they're doing it. And they're managing to kind of lay out a curriculum where kids not only practice activities and do things like that, but they're actually learning math foundational skills. And it's free of cost for students, which I think means a lot to people from certain communities. But yeah, I'm currently working there as a UX designer, but I'm also learning a lot of visual design skills, which, to get into that a little deeper, my career arc so far has been interesting because my first job, I used to make way more high level decisions. Like I was leading projects, I was doing more innovation strategy work because I was working with clients like Coke and Wells Fargo and Bank of America. And like an agency work or an agency job is very fast and you're delivering things in like 3 months and 4 months and they're big things. Like anyway, that is a different conversation only. So that was one thing which was awesome because again, I got to learn to work with a lot of different kinds of people. I've had brainstorming sessions back at the old job where it was just me, one young brown girl, talking to 5 white men who are 50 and older. And it was quite intimidating. Like you walk into a room and you're like, okay, what I'm saying, I don't even know why you want to listen to me, number one. But secondly, I guess there is something sensible in what I'm saying. But there were these moments in those companies because you're just working with those kinds of people. Overall, very positive experience again at Sparks Grove. But Zern, yes. So right now I'm doing a very opposite kind of thing of that, where I'm making more detailed decisions about things. I'm kind of getting into the nitty-gritties of design, working with design libraries, and it's more of like a job that I would have started with relative to what I did at Sparks Grove. And I love it because it's somehow given me a lot of confidence on the technical side of things as a designer, which I feel was the one thing lacking from my previous job. There I got a lot of confidence with other things like client relationships and communications, but here it's like I'm designing one product and one thing for a long period of time, and we're really trying to perfect it over time. And that is, I feel it's really important in life if I want to become a manager of something or like the CEO of something. I would like to know what it is to actually get your hands dirty and understand the nitty-gritties of things. So at Zern, I'm doing that. I'm currently working on middle school stuff where I'm designing tools and activities to help them learn math concepts faster. So it's a mix of UX and visual and research, and it's been really nice so far.
So you said something about design libraries. What are those?
Okay, so design libraries and design systems are basically these tools that companies create for themselves so that all the work that comes out is consistent. And not all companies have that because like when it's a fast moving agency or a newer company, you're kind of just trying to get things out of the door. So all your deliverables look different. So wireframe from one designer will look different from another. But as you mature and become more established, you kind of want things to look the same. And when you look at a company like Zone, which is a curriculum for kids, you can't have things looking different because they'll get confused, and they really do get caught up on the small things. So that's what a design system does essentially, is just help you make everything consistent, so that if a designer leaves and a new one comes on, you're not onboarding from scratch. You just be like, okay, study the design system and pick and put elements from there whenever you need.
Mm-hmm. Also, you told us that you started your internship with like a very big firm. Then your first job was kind of an agency job, and now it's more of a I wouldn't say startup, but like a smaller team and like doing a lot of things hands-on. So, out of all three experiences, like, can you pick one thing that you loved about it, and one thing that definitely could be a reason you probably moved on to the next one, or things that you saw could improve there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting because it did shape my understanding of a big firm. So AT&T was, honestly, I've worked with great people, and I think you could work at the best company but work with really shitty mentors or shitty people and have a bad experience. So for me, all three, touchwood, so far have been good, positive experiences. With AT&T, what I realized is, firstly, culture fit. I don't think it's for me. And very nice people, but again, things move slowly. So if I want to make a decision about a button being somewhere, it takes time for them to kind of move that forward. And I don't know, that didn't seem so appealing to me to continue working there for my whole life, or at least for the next few years. So I'd always gravitated towards smaller, faster companies, and that's why Sparks Grove, when they came along, it was very exciting because I knew somebody who had worked there before. They had very good things to say. So with AT&T, I would say what I learned is structure, and I learned that testing is given a lot of importance, where I was testing with kids actually, and literally getting to the details of things, and making one thing perfect is given a lot of importance in a company like AT&T. But what I didn't like, again, is what I said is slower at that point in my phase was not appealing. So then moved on to Sparks Grove, where what I liked about them is I got a crazy range of experience in the first 2 years of my career, literally making decisions that I was like, are you sure you want me to be the one making the decision? But you kind of are thrown in the deep end and you learn fast. And so that gave me a lot of confidence. What I did not love about that is there was not much structure in the design team in terms of the design system. Everything looked different, and after a point I'm like, okay, I can do this kind of work. I'm good at being a design consultant, but I also want to be a designer and like get in and make things and not have them go into a black hole. Because with agencies, you put things off to a client, you hand them off, and then you just don't know where your design has been. And after a point, that started getting to me because I'm like, I don't know what impact I'm having. And with Zone right now, what I love is I can see the impact I'm having. I can test with kids in schools. And I get good sleep at night knowing that I'm contributing to a good mission. So overall, with Zone, it's been pretty positive so far. Yeah, that has been my experience. And one thing I'll add, sorry if I'm rambling, but one thing I'll add, which I think people who are listening to this, who are younger, and I feel like it helped me when I heard it. When I got my first jobs, I had got one from a more like a bigger firm, stable company, and one from a company like Sparks Grove. And I remember talking to one of my professors who is very relatable, and she's cool, and she'll help you think through these things. And I'd gone to her and I'm like, I'm really having a hard time whether I should go for this company, which stable, like big name, all of that. She's like, listen, you're at a phase in your life where you fortunately don't have a lot to lose, and you don't have a lot of commitments. So just take a risk. If you're feeling good about the smaller company, just go for it. And I think that matters, to be told that, listen, you're not as significant as you may think you are, and one decision is not going to ruin your whole life. But it was really good advice, I feel, for me. So yeah, that helped me decide Sparks Grove.
Nice. So you said you have like a UX role, right?
Yeah.
And so what is the difference between UX, UI? and visual design, or maybe even like just a prototyper, is that something in the same umbrella? Or if you can, because I know like so I work for like a mobile app company, so I know the difference between UI and UX and all of that. But big companies like AT&T and even like other bigger firms or even small businesses, they don't know the difference between UI UX. They all just say it in the same breath and sentence, but I think there's a huge difference. So if you could shine some light on
that. So I can shine light based on my experience, which has been with mainly smaller companies. If I were to apply to like a Google, there is a specific role for UI, specific role for UX, specific role for UX engineer, which honestly I don't know what that means, but I'm sure there is a lot of like responsibility with that role too. It's more of like the probably hardware, more of like the back end side of things as well with engineers. But my point is, I think it's all blurry in the field of UX. My perception so far has been I could be called a product designer and I could be doing everything from research to literally developing the product. So in my eyes, visual design and UX design are two separate fields, I think, because visual goes into like when I talk about what my career is to my job is to people who don't understand the field as much, I explain it as I am the person who makes the blueprint, and then visual designers are people who will like make the building come to life and give it all the details, the windows and the doors and all of that. So that's how I describe it to people, and I feel that is where I see the biggest distinction. I do see the difference between the roles in a startup versus a big company. And in a startup, my role currently is I do visual and UX both. I do more UX, but whenever I'm needed, I go in and do some visual design work too. So I feel like for me, that is the major distinction. And then you have these unicorns, magical people who will come in and do everything from design to development. But I see that more in startups. So yeah, I think UI and UX are very different things, but I don't know much about the other roles, that it goes into, if that makes sense to you.
Also, like, what are the tools that like a UI and a UX, like what different tools do these guys use, and what is like that bridge which connects them?
Correct. So from what I've seen so far, UI designers and visual people in general who come from a more like arts background and they're interested in that kind of stuff, they end up becoming art directors of the company or visual design directors of the company. They use Sketch, which is the same tool that we use as UX designers, but they also use a lot more of the Adobe suite. So they'll use Illustrator and Photoshop, whereas I hardly ever use it. I use it here because there are some times where I need to go in and do stuff, but I mainly work in Sketch, and I work with tools like Paper and Dropbox and things like that to do my research, to build my research. And I also work with certain things like usabilitytesting.com and all of that to conduct research tests. Whereas you won't see a visual designer doing so much research. They do more of like Sketch and Adobe, I'd say.
So wait, UI people use Sketch and Adobe Suite, and UX uses
Sketch, and they use more like I would say ad hoc tools like paper and pen, or paper and Dropbox.
Okay. Like
and
literal paper.
Like literal paper.
Okay.
I think a lot of people will prefer just taking a whiteboard and marker and going and doing that kind of stuff. And I think what connects them, Hiloni, to your question is Sketch is definitely a common tool. But other than that, brainstorming sessions, so important for both UI and UX to work together because they can really help each other, I feel, And normally in brainstorming sessions, we'll have people sitting in there whiteboarding. Even if a visual designer at that point doesn't have a lot to contribute, they can just hear and kind of formulate ideas. So I think that connects them, in my opinion.
Sorry, do you work with like developers? So after your design is completed, then that goes ahead to the developers, right? And then they develop whatever you design.
Yes, that is what happens traditionally. At Zern, they have been very good about involving the CTO. So the CTO is our age. And I mean, it's a small company. It's like 80 people. So he's there in a lot of meetings where he'll sit in there and listen. And if there are some major design like constraints that he wants to tell us about, listen, that's too far or that's too much, he'll be there for that. With Sparkscrow, there was some of that, but there were also many times where the developers would come in later. And I was not a fan of that because I'm like, listen, just sit in there, like sit and listen. I feel it's important to involve the main entities right from the beginning. But yes, I work with developers. Usually they kind of know what to do already at Zone because again, it's a design system where they've been doing it for years. But there are moments when they'll come back and ask questions, or they'll need new assets or new designs or anything like that. But yeah, constant communication is carried out by the PMs who handle the projects.
So this is something that I have seen in my company, and I've heard across with a lot of agencies as well, that there is always a difference of opinion between the technical side of things and the creative. So like my designers have like some opinion in how they want to take things forward, and then there is a hard stop from the technical end, either from a timeline point of view or from feasibility point of view.
Right.
And so in such situations, like how have you been able to manage so far, or how do you kind of make the the deliverable the way you want it while convincing your technical team to help you out there?
Great question. And I think, I don't know if this is true, you all can tell me what you all feel, but I feel like having a nature that is more like, let's bring peace to this world helps, because with me, I've been the conflict resolution person amongst a lot of my friends also a lot of times, and that helps in this situation, because what I used to do is I would try and communicate with the lead developer or whatever in my own way, and I'd say, okay, so you tell me what is not possible. And because we're also from an IT background, you can empathize. I'm not going to tell him, no, I want this and you have to do this, because I understand what feasibility means. I understand, like, it helps you empathize with what they're thinking. But there are moments when developers will want to take the easier route, and that's not right. So that's when I would step in and be like, okay, I'm drawing 3 solutions. This is tier A, like what we should do, tier B, tier C. And that helped me so far is I would draw all 3. And then I'd say, look, is tier A possible? Okay, if it's not possible, let's move to tier B and tier C. So I would just draw out everything, but try to find the balance between what we need for our users and what is easy for them. But it was a lot of communication, a lot of like drawing, and a lot of like, okay, the na tera na mera, like barter system types, and reaching a solution. That worked for me so far. But I think, yeah, you got to communicate with them, not keep them in the dark.
Yeah. And I think your program where you're working with people from different backgrounds at Georgia Tech also helped with that, right? You could speak different languages, you could understand, you can sympathize better.
Yes, I think it helps because you just meet people with, they are better at something. Somebody from a psychology background has had a lot of trouble with certain technical things and vice versa. So you just learn okay, there's a give and take in everything, and you learn to collaborate. Definitely, I think it helped in that way.
I had a question. So you initially brought up this, like when you were studying in Georgia Tech, you said there's elements of psychology as well in design, right? So can you give examples of how you implement like psychology in UX design, and also like what are your thoughts on like ethical design versus unethical design?
So psychology in UX design, I think, plays a big role. When I think I saw it a lot while I was testing with different kinds of people. So when I tested with kids in AT&T, I was testing like a Uverse app with them, like their AT&T Uverse, they have that program, and I was testing it with them, and I went in thinking, oh, it's like a normal test, which I do at Georgia Tech with my friends or whatever. And I was showing them things. I'm like, okay, what do you like? What do you not like? And most of the kids were like, yuck, I don't like this because it's green, and I want to like, I want it to be purple, or I want it to be this. So I feel like that aspect of psychology kicks in, because you're like, okay, my user is different, and I need to understand what my user wants. And you have to, as a designer, you may think you know what's best, but then you're like, I need to step in and kind of not put those blinders on and just listen. Like sometimes you just have to listen to what they need. So from that perspective, I think the psychology kicks in when you make products for different kinds of people. And then with ethical and unethical design, I feel like there are certain things that you should keep in mind as a company today. Make design accessible, like make it like follow color guidelines and font guidelines that most people can use, right? Because now with students, we try to not use very jarring colors. We're trying to keep in mind color blindness. I think those are basic things that now, I mean, it's time for it. It's not like a choice. So those kind of things to do. And secondly, as a designer, I want to be an advocate for the users as much as I can. So trying to find that balance of, I want to make things for you, but sometimes I know better, and then like trying to find that mixture. I think those are some basic things in this field, like accessibility and all of that I feel are keeping me grounded.
There's a lot of companies work with UI UX designers, and kind of the primary thing that they want, or the end goal that they want out of the design, is that people stay on the app or people stay on the website. And I don't know if it's the jargon's used well, but it's called some stickiness. Yeah. So I mean, is that something that you consider ethical, one? And if that is something to be implemented in a right way, what would that be?
So I personally don't get into a lot of that, or my role doesn't get me into a lot of that today, also because right now I'm working in such a niche field, such a niche role. But from what I've seen in the past, I think it's important to know what your users are doing. So whether it's going in and reading the data, even just using Google Analytics, as long as you're doing it the right way and not in an intrusive manner where you're, creeping on people, I feel like in that way it's important, because if you don't know what's going on, you're not going to learn and grow as a company also. But like at Zern, for example, I know we read into data where we need to understand, okay, so the signups this month were so many, were not so many kids are not doing this, so many are not. And that stickiness can be improved with that. And testing is a part of that, where we test and we're like, what, people are not responding to this anymore, so maybe we need to like update. So I think if it's done in the right way, it's good, and it'll help you grow, in my opinion.
Instagram's apps redesign that recently came, where that button where previously it was heart, where people used to go and see likes and all that, they put a shop button there now, so everyone is like by mistakenly. So who takes that decision? Is it the developer or the UX designer?
I mean, I'm assuming that would be something a designer makes, or designer, or like the researcher at the company. But that's damn annoying, man. Like, like that is annoying. So from that point of view, I don't know if it gets into ethics, but it's just annoying to a user, where you're like, you're forcing me to change something and go to a shopping link, not even something different. So
I think Snapchat have felt that, like they changed their UI and they suddenly had such a big loss in the users. I think we were those people who were like big time Snapchat users back in college, and suddenly we saw a big change in the UI, and all of us were like dropped off from the app itself.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of them take risks, and sometimes I wonder why you're taking, like, your model is working. Obviously, improve your design and stay updated, but I wonder what goes on in their mind when they're like, let's just totally transform everything. Because people don't like change, in general. But yeah, it's interesting to think about that. I just don't have much insight into it.
Even when like Johnny Ivy, like they switched the Apple icons from the old boxed ones to that colorful ones, like there was so much backlash.
Must be, dude, because people, imagine you're looking at the same thing like 10 times a day, and then suddenly you see something different. Like, I don't hate it, but I don't like it,
Yeah.
So how do you continue to learn things in your field? Do you have any systems, like you have subscribed to maybe podcasts or newsletters or just meetups or something like that?
Yeah, so I think with my previous job and back in Georgia Tech, I used to do a lot more of that actively, because the kind of work I did also kept varying over time. Currently, I don't do as much of like meetups and stuff, just because, again, it's such a niche field that I'm working in. But the way I keep myself educated today is I just try to understand more about the education industry, and I try to read more of the research related to curriculums, and I try to actually do the math myself before I design, because that is something we all do at the companies, really understand what we're designing for. So that is more what I do today. But back in the day, before this job, I used to look at Medium a lot, because Medium pay people put their own opinions about design. I like to read that. There's this company, well-established company called Nielsen Norman Group, and they are kind of like part of the founding fathers of UX. They have that credibility where they go into research about usability principles and all of that. So when I forget sometimes things, I'll go and I'll read that stuff. So it's called nngroup.com. And then I know a lot of designers get inspiration from Dribbble.com, where people put up their creative stuff. And then there are other couple like UX Planet, where again, experts go in and put up little snippets and blog posts about the most relevant topics. So I think I look at all of that from time to time. But today, yeah, it's more go in, understand the education industry, and stay up to date with design principles is what I try to do.
And what is like the natural progression in your career? Like after like 10 years, would you be like the director of UX, or is there like a director of UX, or is it called something else?
Yeah, so there is a director of UX. The natural progression, the most generic one I can think of would be you start at like UX designer, then you go to something like senior UX designer or UX designer 2. Then you go into manager, where also you're doing a lot of UX design, but you're probably just handling a team as well and making higher level decisions. And then after, yeah, like you said, eventually it would be UX director. And yeah, that would be the natural progression. So somebody who really wants to get into UX to that extent would probably aim to be the director of UX at a company, I think.
Yeah. And one more question in UX space. If someone wants to transition from like a non-UX career,
yeah,
how does one do that?
I think this is a great question, because everybody should understand this about UX at least. It is kind of like being a dancer in a certain way, because if you want to be a dancer, you have to show your dance skills, right? Like you can be 50 years old, but you can dance like a pro. And it's similar for UX, where yes, having a background from a school like Georgia Tech or CMU or all of those matters. And when people see it, they get impressed. But in the long run, I would rather see somebody's portfolio. So portfolio is crucial. I don't think you should expect to get a UX job without showing off some skills. Whether you have a physical portfolio in hand or whatever, just have something where you can show your skills. If somebody wants to kind of transfer their career, I would say start doing little projects, like study online. There are lots of resources, like, start studying online, or try to find work with your friends. Be like, oh, can I redesign this for you? Or can we work on a project together? And as you get more confident, maybe sign up for like freelance work and do more of that. For people who don't have the structure of a school, I'm saying this mainly, because in school you're still given opportunities to work on this project and that project. So when I came out of Georgia Tech, I'd already worked on like 6-7 projects which I could put on my portfolio. So yes, going to a school, if you have the resources and if you can, do it, because you'll get the whole experience. You'll get the experience of internships, working with different people, all of that. But I don't think it's necessary if you're willing to put in the dedication and learn online and just kind of build your own website and start showing it to people. But you've got to be very, I feel back then it would have been hard for me to do that. You've just got to be very like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and very motivated about it. But totally possible if you want to switch careers. Just be self-driven and find projects and do UX work and show people.
Any apps or websites that you love in terms of design that are your like absolute favorites?
I'll have to look through, but a couple that I love TurboTax. I love it as a UX designer, but I know there are a lot of problems with TurboTax. So I'm not going to get into that, but as a user, I have never smiled while doing taxes, and I did that when I used TurboTax. So I've always been a big fan of their design. They have a lot of other issues, I believe, but that is one. I always give that as an example. Then other things like Headspace, yeah, so nice.
I was going to say, I love Headspace design, it's so nice.
Right, like apps you just open and you're like, wow, what is going on? Like, so beautiful. There's another game called Monument Valley. I don't know if y'all have played it. Adit's like, I know, I've played it. But such a beautiful game. Like you just open it, it's simple and like, I don't know, like just lovely to look at, I feel. So things like that. I'm sure there are a few more. If I think of, I'll text you later. But other than that, I think these three come to mind right now.
Yeah, I think Kevin Spacey was playing that in House of Cards, like season 1 or something. That's how it became. Yeah, like the very first version of
I didn't know that. Very cool game.
Cool. So if you had to give your younger self some advice, like what would you tell Tanisha from DJ?
Many things, I think. But a couple of things I would tell her is firstly, chill out. Like, there's one thing where you learn to work smart and not work hard, which I learned at Georgia Tech actually. Was one of the things I learned is you can get the same results by just working smarter. And that happened. And now that's been a lesson I've been practicing. Another thing would be, I think I was a bit of a worrier in general, like not even related to studies or anything. It was just like, if something would be in my head, it would just be in my head to the extent that it would gnaw at me. Then I was like, listen, I can't keep worrying about everything that's going on in the world, whether it's something I saw, something people said, something, because it kind of just eats at you. And you've got to step in and be like, listen, this doesn't matter. And one thing I do today when I get too stressed out about something, I watch this video of the pale blue dot, where the pale blue dot basically just shows you that you are one dot, not even you. The Earth is one dot in the galaxy. And you are one dot on that. And when I watch that, I'm like, oh my God, who cares what I think? And I just like chill out after that. So yeah, I would just tell her on the learning side, I would be like, take it easy. Don't get too stressed about stuff. Make mistakes and don't chase perfection because it doesn't exist. And on the positive side, I would tell her, yes, keep your fitness going because I feel like that's something that really grounded me. And stay weird. Like I would tell my younger self, I would say, stay weird. It works and it's good.
Nice. I have like an annual tradition. On my birthday, I watch 5 videos, and Pale Blue Dot is one of that videos. I watch those 5 videos like every year. It's a beautiful.
You're like, who are you? Like, to heck on. So
gives you a good perspective.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what's next? What's next for you? What are you excited about?
It's like so I think what's next for me, number one, you all know I'm moving back to India for good, which was a very big decision, but seems like the right decision at the right time. But for the first time, I feel like I don't have a concrete answer about what's next, and I'm going with it. I'm like, okay, it's cool. Uncertainty is good. But as of now, I'm going to continue to work with my company in India for the next how much of a time I can. From there, and then at the same time I want to kind of understand more about the education space in India, see if there's something I can get into over there over time. So I'll be looking into more of that once I get there. And at the side, if time, and I mean not time, but at the side I would also like to get into the fitness industry a little bit and see if I can do a side hustle related to that. So for now, that's the plan. Hopefully someday I'll have my own business where I can do all of this. I don't know how, but a little bit of fitness, a little bit of design. But yeah, that's the plan. Vague as of now. Yeah.
Great.
We'll move on to our next segment. It's called the top 3. And we'll love some recommendations from you. It starts with the top 3 books that you recommend and which is one book that you have gifted the most.
So one book I've gifted the most is from this set called, I think it's called Mindfulness Essentials by this ancient Asian writer. And I think he's like a meditation practitioner. His name is, I don't want to say it wrong, but it's like Thich Nhat Hanh. And he writes these books about how to walk, how to sleep, how to love. And they're these tiny books with cute pictures. And it's just like teaches you about small things like how to walk mindfully. Like when you take a step, don't just take a step like you're sleepwalking. Think about everything you do. And I love the way he's done it. Tiny books, but I've gifted it to a couple of friends actually already. So that I've gifted the most, but then there are some others that I really like. One is an essay by this lady called Chimamanda Adichie. She's like a author and feminist, and you should watch her YouTube video. I think everybody should. Again, her book is like, it's this tiny, it's an essay, but I feel like all women, all men should read it because it just helps you understand what being a feminist is, which is not what so many people think it
Dude,
is.
I have read it, and I made like all my cousins, like 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, I made them read it.
Yeah, it's just so nice, and she says it so
Yeah.
well. So that is one, and then The Girl on the Train, man. That is a book I read recently, and it's so twisted, and you just won't look at anybody the same way. Always.
Oh my God. Girl on the Train is by the same author who also, I mean, that movie I forgot, Gone Girl. It's the same author. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. So
Yeah,
twisted.
dude, it's so twisted.
Yeah, correct.
So, top 3 movies, TV show recommendations.
One is all time Pursuit of Happiness. Just too good, that movie. I don't know, I just love it. Second, I really like motivational sports movies. So whether it's Chak De India or it's Mary Kom or it is, which was the other sports movie, man? Karate Kid, the newer one though. I just love those movies. I just think they're very inspiring. And Chak De India, I've kind of gone through that myself in the throwball field. So I was like, yes, I feel you. Like, I understand. So that, and then there are 100 more, like Harry Potter and this and that. But yeah.
Cool. The next one, top 3 podcast or YouTube channel recommendations.
So one, which is probably, you all have probably heard this from a lot of people, is How I Built This by Guy Raz. And I just like the way he tells the stories and how learning about how different people are building their businesses and stuff. And second is this podcast called Strangers, which is awesome. But just a disclaimer, it's very dark, like very dark sometimes, but captivating stories about people around you who you would never know do the things they do. Very cool and very creepy at the same time, but it's called Strangers. But yeah, I would say these two are my top right now.